What's up, folks? Welcome to another episode of a 10 Horse Money YouTube channel. Tuesday Night Live. Sorry I'm a little bit late. I got over to my father-in-law's house. If you guys don't know, I think most of you do know that I don't have good internet at my house, and I literally live 200 yards away from my father-in-law. So I have to come over here to do the live stream, and I had planned on being over here earlier, but I had some people looking at my house, the old house that's still for sale, and I got caught up over there. So I run over here like 15 minutes ago, and I fire up the laptop, and there's no internet. I'm like, great. It's exactly what I need to see right after a full day of work and run around 100 miles an hour. So anyway, I went upstairs and unplugged the router and did some voodoo magic on it. And 11 minutes ago? No, 9 minutes ago, it started working. And I just sent the link over to Ron, so he'll be on here in a little bit. But I do apologize for that. Good to see everybody on here. What's up, Jay? Just got off the phone with Jay too long ago. We had a fun weekend. The Warrior William tournament is awesome. You guys really need to put that on your list for next year. It's in October. Hold on a second. Just got a text from Ron. Okay, I'm going to try to send him another link real quick. Just bear with me. It's just that kind of night. It's that kind of night. But the Warrior William tournament was awesome. Put it on your calendar. It's in October, Lake of the Ozarks. It was a blast. Nothing but a good time. Ate way too much and no complaints. Didn't catch any fish. We only had 3 keepers. Okay, got that sent over to Ron. We'll get going here in just a minute. Got a good show planned for you. We're going to really break down fall fishing, fall transition, baits, that kind of stuff. And we will be doing a giveaway. We're going to be giving away some Cumberland Pro jigs. And I talked to Isaac, the owner of Cumberland Pro, a few days ago, and he wants to do something for the holidays. So either Thanksgiving or Christmas, we're going to try to get a big giveaway together. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. What's up, Stephanie? Good to see you, as always. And she did make a cameo appearance in one of my latest videos. That was really cool to meet her and Todd out there on the lake. What's up, Tom? I went to Six Flags. I'll tell you a quick story before Ron gets on here. I went to Six Flags Sunday. And man, I'm not built for those roller coasters anymore. It's hard on you. I did ride the mine train like 3 or 4 or 5 times. My daughter Ella, that's her favorite, and I was okay with that because that's a minimal roller coaster. And then we rode the Screaming Eagle, and something about the wooden roller coasters, they're real jerky. It was a blast. It was fun, but I had like a headache. And then we rode another one, but I didn't ride any like the crazy ones. Like the boomerang, does all these crazy loops and stuff. I don't know. I'm just not up for that anymore. But we had fun. It was a Fright Fest up there, so it was a good time. And if you go to Six Flags, make sure you eat as much as possible before you go in the park, or pack a picnic lunch, because like a hamburger and fries was $17.99, and it was like $6 for a soda. And a waffle cone ice cream was like $11.99. So you got 4 people that you're feeding, it gets expensive quick. I think we spent like $120 just on food. It was ridiculous. So next time we go, if we do go again, we're definitely going to pack a lunch. I see Ron on there. See you in the background. You ready to jump on here? Thumbs up? Okay. We'll bring Ron in. Okay. What's up, buddy?
What's going on, man?
How much, man? I was just complaining about going to Six Flags and spending like a stupid amount of money on food. I was blown away. Beer. I didn't get any beer, but if a person was wanting to buy a beer there, it was like $14.99 for a draft beer.
That makes for a sober day, doesn't it?
It sure does. I drink water.
Yeah.
I was very happy drinking water.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want to be drunk riding roller coasters either. That's
No.
not going to turn out good.
Where's JB at?
He is on a hunting trip. He's leaving in the morning for 3 days. I don't. He's somewhere in Missouri, but he just texted me yesterday, I believe, and said he wasn't going to be on here tonight. So hopefully he shoots him a big buck or what. It's got to be. I don't know if it's duck. Is duck season? Yeah, duck season's open right now, isn't it?
Up north, I think it is. He said. Now that you say that, we weren't fishing in the same boat together. I don't remember what day it was, last week or whatever. We were on Lake of Egypt together, and we ended up fishing next to each other quite a bit and talking. And he said something about going to a buddy's place for deer hunting. So I didn't know that time. So cool.
That's Very what cool. It is. Yeah, Kobe. That's what we'll do. I'm gonna give away some Cumberland Pro jigs as the giveaway tonight, and we'll definitely throw in some Bama swim jigs, some pig jigs. Those are both really good baits, and they're both working right now. The swim jigs, one of my favorite fall baits for just covering water, and it's kind of got that smaller shad profile, and you can do a lot of stuff with it. And of course, a jig's a jig. You know, you can catch fish on a jig any time of the year. It doesn't matter if it's middle of summer or middle of winter. There's always a jig bite somewhere.
Amen.
So we'll give away those. So how you been out on the water much, Ron?
Yeah, I've been the last couple of weeks. I've been on Egypt mostly, just fun fishing. I've got my last Angler's Choice of the year coming up on Cedar, so I went to Cedar yesterday and hadn't been out there for a few weeks, but it was kind of a nice break, though, to be honest with you. So I found a few fish, but I need to get back after a couple more days before the tournament.
What was the water temp out there now?
High 60s to 70 for me.
Really?
Yeah, it just dropped down. And I saw a few places. I actually saw mid 60s. It just kind of depended where you were. It was really windy yesterday, so that was pushing some of the water around. But it's kind of funny every year that the water temperature kind of stair steps up, and then it stair steps back down. It's not usually that straight line. And for the longest time, we were stuck at like that 75 range. It seemed like.
Yeah. And
then finally we're at that 70 or maybe even a little cooler. Days are getting shorter and the nights are cool, so it's going to cool off now.
It does that in the spring too, that water temp.
Yeah.
It's like it holds around that 52 to 54 forever.
Yeah, it's forever. Yeah, and the next thing you know, it's 70, right?
Yeah.
It's never this straight line.
Yeah,
but anyway. So
I'm always ahead of the fish. I mean, we've talked about that. We're ready to get away from the jerk bait and the A-rig and start throwing a chatterbait, but sometimes it's like we're throwing it a little bit too early.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, or in the fall you'll jump to stuff that you think should be working in the fall and it's not quite there yet. And you know, I'm fortunate I get to fish a lot, so I get bored. You know, by the end of the summer, I'm bored with whatever was going on in the summer. You know what I mean? I get, it's like I'll literally drive past the spot because I don't want to fish it.
Yeah, Rex said Cedar he saw 64 degrees. David's got 65. Let's see. East Fork had 64 on Sunday. Topwater bite was the ticket for big ones. Yeah, I know the Topwater bite over the weekend was definitely the deal. You're frozen up, Ron. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but you could close out and come back in. I know over the weekend, the Topwater bite was the deal for sure. You know, but it was windy, rainy, and the water was cooling down. And that's that time when you should probably put the jig down and cover a bunch of water with a Topwater. We fished a jig a lot. And just wasn't just wasn't happening. Like Ron was talking about trying to be ahead of the fish. I've been trying to force a frog bite like for the last month. I finally had a couple days where, I caught some fish on the frog. They just weren't big. And I guarantee that's got to be going on right now. You get these days like the last 3 or 4 days where it's in the 40s in the morning and you get a little sunshine in the afternoon. I think that's like phenomenal frog weather. Ron's coming back on here now. All right, we got you back.
Cool.
When are you getting that fiber?
I've got it. That's the frustrating thing.
Huh.
I'm still getting the circle of death on my TV, on my Fire Stick, and they've been out once to look at it. They've got a loose connection or something somewhere. So it's kind of frustrating, honestly.
Hey, how about Trey McKenna?
Dude, that's who you should have on right now. Hopefully you called him.
He's going to be on next week. I got all of him.
Good.
Yeah.
It's I wish him all the luck, and I love
what's up, Rich?
I love having a local guy there. We had Chad Morgan Taylor for a while, but now he's 18 years old, and the dog caught the car. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so now, I'm rooting for him 100%. I want him to have success. But now the whole structure of how he goes to tournaments and who's there with them all changes. And now we're going to find out. The thing he's got going for him is he is so good on forward sonar. I've watched it. I fished against him 3 times this year. He's won all 3 tournaments. And he's won them pretty handily, really. And I watched him catch a few, and it's just forward sonar, a lot of it, and he is good at it. And I told him at the last tournament I fished against him, we were talking at the weigh-in. I said, now listen, you go down there to Florida, and you catch enough fish to qualify, and then you leave us alone. He got a chuckle out of it. His mom was standing right there. So, no, I'm happy for him, and it's really not that far away when they start. Where they start February, I think.
Yeah.
So that's not. He doesn't have a lot of time between now and then to get everything lined up, and just all the work that those guys all have to do before a season. So pretty exciting.
I thought it was funny. In between opens, he jumped in one of those Wednesday nighters on Cedar and won.
Yeah, he was that was one of them. He took my money. And he never.
Did he hadn't been on the lake?
Huh?
He hadn't been on the lake. He'd been he'd been fishing up north or wherever.
Yeah, he had his big boat. He put in his Charger back in Pomona. I don't think he ever left Pomona. And he caught like 1 million overs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, more power to him, and it just means we got to get better at it, because it's not going away, and we just got to get better.
Yeah, what do you think about the future of forward-facing sonar? I know there was, when we had Menendez on here a while back, he was talking about there was talks amongst the committee in the elites about making some kind of limitations. I mean, he mentioned like 48 inches of graph, so that would have been 412s, and then one forward-facing sonar transducer on the boat. But obviously that didn't happen because it's a Wild West again. They didn't pass any rules, and you can do whatever. And then you take somebody like Koi Fujita or Fajita. Is it Koi Fujita? Anyway, he's got 5 transducers. Yeah, exactly. So I think we're going to see some more of that. I mean, I've heard some people on live streams talking about they were kind of waiting to see if Bass was going to implement some sort of rule. And then once there's no rule implemented, I would imagine there's going to be several people with multiple forward-facing sonar transducers on their boats.
They have to. It's how they make their living, and they have to. And it's there's nothing wrong with it. There's also nothing wrong with the guys that say, hey, wait a minute. Because we have kind of reached that magic line in the sand. Like, the technology is so good, you don't want it to take away from the basics of the sport. But now what I do understand is they reached out to every single Elite Series angler and said, hey, what are your thoughts? And they have formed a committee of some sort this year. And they're going to be polling the anglers at the end of each tournament as to, hey, how'd you catch them? Forward sonar, blah, 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 blah. And so they're being smart. They're getting the actual data of what they think is going on before they have a knee-jerk reaction and make a rule that they don't really have to make. So I think that's smart. They're going to play this year out, but they are paying attention, and they are collecting whatever data points and getting opinion surveys from their anglers and so on and so forth. So if there's a change of any sort, we wouldn't see that till 2025. And on a selfish standpoint, I'm glad for that for Trey. I want him to get his first year in, so because he's dominant using it, and hopefully help him get a foothold on his career with the elites, because he's a good fisherman, and a lot of people don't think about it, but I can remember fishing against Trey when he was 12, 13 years old, when Rick Cheatham, who deserves a shout out because Rick Cheatham is his coach.
Yes, 100%.
And Rick is one of the best fishermen in the Midwest. But I can remember fishing against him when he was 12, 13, 14 years old, before there was forward sonar, and he was doing well then. So the kid knows how to fish. He was brought up old school, really. But his age allows him to be, I think I was thinking about this today, and I think the difference is like why can't a 60-year-old guy be as good at forward sonar as some 18-year-old kid? And I think a lot of it is the kids are not afraid of it. They embrace it, and they're anxious to learn it. And so they go into learning this new technology with the right attitude. Whereas a guy like me or some of the older pros, they'll just come around and tell you they're learning it because they feel like they have to, not because they want to. And I think that's the difference. The older guys have trouble embracing it with excitement. Whereas the young kids, it's, hey, this is cool, man. This is, just like everything else I'm used to in the world. So I think that's the difference. Just my take on it. But
well, and I think you have to.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You kind of have to. I agree with that 100%. What you just said, that makes total sense. I think you have to unlearn some stuff too, like get outside your comfort zone and not.
Yes.
We're so. I mean, I consider myself in the same boat as you as far as learning the old school. I mean, I've adapted, forward facing sonar, but I'm not a scoper. I'm not a guy that goes out for 8 hours a day and fishes with just using live scope.
Right.
And nothing against that. It's probably a good thing to do, actually. And I've spent several hours behind it on a trip multiple times, but I still have a tendency to go back to what I know, fish a brush pile or the bank or whatever it may be. I think they haven't learned, a lot of these younger kids haven't learned that, and they don't have to get away from that to just totally commit to live scope. And, it's like, I've heard people say this before when they take their kid in the boat and they've got live scope. The kid doesn't see any fish, or whoever it is doesn't see any fish, and they're like, why are we fishing here? There's no fish.
It's a good question.
So yeah, I mean, we can see there's no fish. Why do we continue
to throw that spinner bait up against the bank? Yeah.
Right. And I was thinking about it, fishing with my buddy Mike. We fished the Anglers in Action Team Trail. He doesn't have live scope. He's a jig fisherman. He loves fishing brush piles. I was just thinking how inefficient that is, because he has to make a couple casts just to find the brush pile with his jig, even though he's got a waypoint. But you got wind blowing you off course, you got boat wakes. So there's just multiple casts just to find the brush pile. Okay. And then you got to make a couple casts dragging that jig through that brush pile just to see if you can get bit. Where with the forward facing sonar, you can look in it and you can kind of tell. You might still make one cast just to see if there's a fish behind it that you're not seeing. But you can tell really quick. A, you're going to drop your bait right where it needs to go, first of all. But secondly, you can tell if there's bait around it, if there's crappie around it. And then like I was telling Mike, there might be a brush pile 20 feet away from where you're casting, and you won't even know that it's there because you're not sitting there looking around with it. So it's so much more efficient using that technology that it's hard to, I've been using it. Like I said, I don't like spend hours and hours each time going out and casting at fish. But when I'm casting at specific targets, I'm using it to line up my casts and stuff. And when you're fishing without it, after having fished with it for a while, you really see how inefficient it is not having it. I mean, you can still catch fish, and there's no problem not having it at all. But it does cut down the time that you're at least casting to stuff more accurately.
And think about in the tournament setting the difference in pre-fishing. Your efficiency pre, being able to use all your electronics and how much more efficient you can cover water pre-fishing. I was listening to Matt Pangrack. He was pre-fishing an event somewhere up north. I don't know if it was at St. J. I don't know what it was. But he was fishing a little bit, and he ran into one of the pros. Don't know who it was, and the other pro said to Panger, "Why are you fishing? Just drop your aqua view down there and see what they are." It was a smallmouth deal, apparently. And Panger's like, he said, "I've been out here for 2 days. I made a cast yet, and I got 5 or 6 schools located." And he's running around covering water while Panger's throwing his whatever, Ned rig or whatever he did. I don't know what he did, but
yeah.
So just think about in a tournament setting, the pre-fishing, how much that technology covers the water faster. It's a different game than what it used to be, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I think there's a different mindset too when you reach that level. And I experienced that just fishing that BFL out of with Jake Lawrence about a month ago. He's a guy you're going to see him more and more. He won on, I think it was on Pickwick. He had 50 pounds for 2 days, and the guy in second had 30 pounds.
Holy cow!
Yeah. And he won that 2-day super tournament on Kentucky Lake. But watching him fish, he worked hard all day long. We fished 50 to 60 spots, just anything from a little rock to a stump to a little piece of brush, whatever it was. And he did not waste any casts. I talked to him off and on throughout the day, and he said, you get your best cast is your first cast on a good fish. If they don't hit it that first time, the chances of you catching it on the second cast are very, very small. So he'll make 2 casts to a fish, and typically he's done with that fish, and he's already looking for the next one in that area. And if he had another piece of cover that he wanted to fish that was 100 yards away, instead of trolling over there, he would put his vest on, fire the motor up, and idle over there really fast. That's how much water he was covering. There's hardly any dead time at all. And he fished like that all day long. Even when he had 18 pounds in the live well, he was still fishing like he didn't have a keeper in the boat, even up until 30 minutes. But I think that's how a lot of the really good tournament fishermen fish. And like you said, they go out and mark stuff, and they mark as many places as they can using their forward side scan, of course, and then forward facing sonar. And then they're coding their icons to let them know which areas are worth fishing the next day or during the tournament day. They got these milk runs, and they don't deviate a whole lot from that. of course that depends on the time of the year. There are some times when you do kind of have to soak a general area, but if somebody that's really fishing specific spots, they're going to cover a lot of area. And if they are just in a general location, they're not going to spend a lot of time casting to the same fish. They're going to keep moving and working hard. One more thing about the live scope is I think you're going to see a lot of people with those breaks, like the crappie breaks, like Matt.
Oh yeah, 3-pound got those.
Yeah, the guy I fished with, Jake, had those on his bass boat.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's something you're definitely going to be seeing that next year, because if you're a scoper, it's something that you need. You can be moving at 6 or 7 on the trolling motor, and then when you see what you need to see, you can just hit those brakes and it just stops you instead of drifting forward or having to spin the head of your trolling motor and backwashing the brush pile or something. Yeah, I mean, it stops you instantly, and you're square too. When you turn that trolling motor around, your nose is kind of going to do this a little bit until you get lined up. But those crappie brakes are on both sides on your power bows, and they just stop you square. And it was amazing to see all that work together. But I think that's something that you're going to see a lot of the pro fishermen using here in the future.
That wouldn't surprise me. It's always about better boat control. Always.
Let's answer a couple questions here. Stephanie's got a question. She says, what baits do you recommend for when the water temps drop? That's my hardest time of fishing.
One thing for me, how it affects my fishing, everyone fishes different, so this isn't a universal answer, but in the summertime, as you know, Gabe, I love to throw a power worm. If I can get away with it, middle of the summer, there's nothing I'm happier doing than with a power worm, a plastic worm in a brush pile or point or whatever. And now they'll still bite a worm when the water gets colder, but there seems to be a greater instance where they prefer a jig as that water gets colder over the worm. So that's the first thing, and it might be in the same areas. But that's the first thing I noticed. And when I was on Cedar yesterday, I had my old worm that I had on the deck of the boat since May, and I was like, I need to put old jig on, and that'll be on the next time I go out. And I'm not sure I really understand why that is, but it definitely plays that way for me. And the other thing is too, this is going to sound a little different. This time of year, when the water starts to get cold, and when I'm fishing the jig, I'm fishing slow usually if I'm fishing traditional. But a lot of times, my retrieve speed, I notice, speeds up this time of year. And I don't know if that's because they're kind of really on the shad now, and they're kind of in that mode of chasing, or I don't really know what it is, but I've noticed it'll eventually go away in the winter, but it seems like I can get away with a faster retrieve right now than what I could in the middle of the summer. If I'm throwing a buzz bait or working a frog or whatever, a spinner bait. I've noticed that quite a bit, and I don't know. And again, on the lakes I fish are shad lakes, and they get dialed in. You watch those shad on your graph; they're moving sometimes. Mm-hmm. And but those bass, when you can see them darting in and out of there, and they're going 100 miles an hour. So sometimes it may be that, and plus our water is getting clear typically this time of year. And that clear water, you don't want those fish to get a really good look at your bait. And sometimes just by speeding up that retrieve, they don't get a real good look at it, and you can maybe create a reaction bite. I guarantee one thing, you cannot reel it fast enough where they can't get it if they want it. There's no gear ratio reel made that will retrieve a lure faster than what a bass can swim. That's 1,000% true. But so experiment with change of your retrieve rate, regardless of what type of lures you're using. And then the biggest thing I notice is that is that switch from a long plastic to a jig. I don't. Other than that, I don't change too much. I've changed more of where I fish.
Yeah, I think you start seeing, kind of on the moving bait topic, you start seeing them chase a little more when the water starts getting a little bit colder. Like your your buzz bait, maybe in the summer you might get a good topwater, like moving topwater bait for the first hour, maybe 2 hours, unless you got a storm or something moving in,
Right.
an overcast day. But typically, that period's kind of short. But in the fall, it seems like it can be extended a little more.
It can be all day. Yeah,
it can be all day. Yeah, they want, a buzz bait. They'll chase a buzz bait. They'll chase even like a
rattle
glide
trap.
bait, rattle trap. Yeah, a crankbait. They just kind of, they want to hit those moving baits. And back to the jig thing, Lake of the Ozarks, that's a big pattern down there, is actually swimming that jig instead of just letting it sit and soak like you would have to when the water's in the mid 70s on up to the 80s and maybe even low 90s. When it gets down there, high 60s, even low 70s, that's a big pattern down there, is actually swimming a 1/2 ounce to 5/8, 3/4 ounce, just a football jig, not even necessarily a swim jig, but just around those docks, because those fish are more aggressive. They'll actually come out and grab it, where in the summertime they're kind of lethargic sometimes, and they just kind of let it go by, but they're feeding up. And so they're more aggressive and they're more apt to chase that stuff. That's like glide baits. Right now is a good time to start throwing the Shads and the S-Wave, whatever your glide bait of choice is, mag draft. They'll start hitting those baits.
Yeah. And the Shad and those glide baits, while more and more guys are throwing them, they solve a problem. And if you pay attention, these fish, all of our lakes anymore, they're pounded, right? And these fish see everything. But if you pay attention, pretty much everything they see, almost all spinner baits are the same size, to a fish.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all jigs are the same size. Worms, they see the same profile over and over and over again. So in the fall, one thing that I think helps is changing your profile. So when you're throwing a big glide bait, you're throwing a bigger profile that the guy in front of you is not throwing. You can also go the other direction. You can downsize quite a bit, all the way down to the micro stuff. And changing that profile in the same lure category oftentimes will help get those fish that are getting hard to catch. You can get those fish to trigger. I don't do it enough anymore. I used to have fun. As you know, I like to throw a spinning rod whenever I can. And this wasn't just fall. This was just to combat when the fishing got tough. I've got a little tackle box in the garage full of nothing but just little tiny crankbaits of all various types. I go through and I put little better hooks on, because they usually don't come with adequate hooks. But I mean little crankbaits. And you can go down a bank, not throwing normal whatever, and you can go down that bank with those little bitty stuff. And it's like you're in a whole new lake sometimes. And that can, sometimes it's just showing them something that they haven't seen a lot of. Just anything you can do in your imagination to get away from what you think they've seen in your lake, day in and day out.
Yeah, and that can apply to spinnerbait too.
Sure.
Downsizing the blades. I throw that War Eagle. It's called Screaming Eagle. So it's a 1/2 ounce bait, but it's on a 1/4 ounce frame. So it's a small profile, but it's got the weight to where you can move it really fast, and it's got really small blades. A lot of times they'll hit that over just your standard size 3/8 or 1/2 ounce spinnerbait, especially in the fall. You got a lot of small bait in the fall still. I mean, there's a lot of little popcorn shad flipping around, and sometimes going from a full-size crankbait to a micro crankbait, or a full-size spinnerbait to a smaller spinnerbait. There's people that go the other way. There's people that start throwing 3/4 ounce spinnerbaits and 1 ounce spinnerbaits. But
it accomplishes the same thing. getting away from, what they've seen a million of all year long. And it's just your imagination is, this is a good time of year to experiment. The other thing that happens in the fall, our fish are as spread out, or getting to be as spread out right now as they will be all year. And the reason for that is, that like on our local lakes, that thermocline's been 15 to 18 all summer, right, basically. And now, like when I was on Cedar yesterday, it looked like it was in some places there was no thermocline, at least that I could pick up on the graph anyway. But all the other places where it's been 15, 17, 18, whatever it's been all summer, it's down 22 to 25 now. And that's as that water cools, we talked about our water temperature at the beginning of the show. That cooler water is more dense, so it sinks. And as that process happens in the fall, it pushes that thermocline down to the point where eventually we'll get turnover. And I think we've actually had a little bit at Cedar based on some of the watercolor I saw. It's getting that tannic color to it.
Yeah.
So what that does, but some fish, if they've been sitting on some brush pile on a point somewhere or whatever, on a rock pile at 15 feet on top of the thermocline, and you get some cool weather comes by, and the next thing you know, that thermocline drops down to 22 or whatever, and they go down there and say, hey, there's oxygen down here. Oh, wait, there's bait down here. So then you get a few fish that go down there. And then you get the fish that do the other thing that seem to show up a little shallower than where they've been. So you get a wide range of things going on, especially here in the Midwest, you got to kind of keep an open mind, and every lake's a little bit different, but they can be a lot of different places right now.
Yeah, that sometimes, the fish like in the post spawn, and then in the fall they'll be as deep as they'll ever be. It depends on the lake, but it's kind of sneaky. Yep. Everybody thinks going shallow is the way to go, but like you said, for the reasons you just said, that thermocline kind of dissipates, and they can go wherever the heck they want.
And forward-facing sonar proves it, because
sure.
I'll tell you one thing. I chuckled. I was thinking about this when I was on the lake yesterday. We've all fished with someone who's brand new to fishing, and you're running the front of the boat, and the newbie's in the back of the boat, and they got the spinning rod upside down or whatever. And you look back there, and they're throwing out in the middle of the lake instead of at the bank where you think they're supposed to be throwing.
Yeah.
Well, after what I see on sonar the last couple of years on forward sonar, those guys might have been throwing in the right place the whole time. There's fish out there all the time. But in the fall, it just gets there's just a lot of things going on. And it's a great time of year to, one, use your electronics, and two, to try a bunch of different stuff and experiment with it. And just don't be afraid to not catch them. There's nothing wrong with not catching them.
Well, Dion said, I think it was about a year ago when we were talking about fall fishing, and he was fishing out of the back of the boat. Lawson was up front and Dion was sitting in the back. I don't know if they were pre-fishing for anglers in action, or if they were just out fun fishing or whatever. But I think one of the questions was, what would you be doing if you were fishing, let's just say the Big Bass Bash? And he said, I'd be throwing a big swim bait as far as I could into the middle of the cove. He said, based on what I'm seeing with forward-facing sonar, there's fish swimming around everywhere out in the middle of the cove, just like they are swimming up towards the bank where we think they are.
No one's fishing for those out there, or they didn't used to anyway.
No,
in the middle.
No, you're right. And you will catch a fish every once in a while. If you just sometimes you're skipping those docks and you get a bird's nest and you turn around and you fire out into the middle of the lake just to kind of clean house, and you're picking it out and you're straightening it out, and then you start the next thing you know, you're like, what? That's kind of heavy.
What's going on here?
There's a fish on there. Just a random cast out there.
Yeah.
But those suckers are swimming around everywhere. We're just too stupid to figure them out most of the time. Talking about Trey, isn't he the youngest ever to qualify for the elites? He's got to be right there.
I think you have to be 18 to fish it, don't you? I don't
I
think they
would
allow them
think
younger
so.
than that.
Yeah, he's right there. Pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. Here's a question from Oliver. It says, Ron, do you think that the shad movement in the early fall creates a false sense of where or what the fish may be doing?
Yeah, it can.
Because you see a lot of shad
With no
and there's
fish.
not bass relating to them. And you would think, okay, I'm idling, I'm looking for bait, I found the bait. Okay, there's got to be bass. But a lot of times the bass haven't found them or they're just ignoring those shad, you know?
Yeah, because the shad are everywhere, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
At least on lakes I fish, I'm finding shad. I'm finding shad in the backs of the necks, and I'm also finding shad out in the main basins, out relatively deep. So there's food wherever those fish want, wherever the bass want to be. There's food. So yeah, you can see a bunch of bait fish and make the wrong interpretation. And that one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight. I don't want to go off on a tangent. You don't want to go on, but
I'm with
this
you, man.
time
I'll
of
follow
year, I think they're always important, and I'm talking other than forward sonar, your electronics, and idling and looking around as these fish are starting to break their summer patterns. Whatever lake you're on, the summer pattern is going to slowly drift away, and whatever the fall pattern is on your local lake, that's what it's moving towards. So fish are moving. So idling and looking for them is, this is a really important time of year to be able to do that. And when I'm idling and looking for fish, I would rather find fish off of shad, much easier to catch for me, as opposed to finding fish buried in a ton of shad. That's a lot of competition. So when I used to idle, oh, look at all the shad, great spot. And I stop and fish. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not catching anything. And as I got better at my electronics, I would idle the same groups of shad and say, hey, there's no fish in there, and just keep going. So yeah, just because there's shad, that's part of the equation, but it doesn't mean anything unless there's bass in them. So, and the electronics today, it's probably, I think, one of the most important times of the year for side scan. Before you ever get to the front of the boat and start worrying about dropping the trolling motor in with forward sonar, you got to be able to use side scan right now.
I mean, that applies to how many times have we went into the back of a pocket or a creek or something, and you could pretty much walk across the shad, and you're like, "Holy cow! I found the holy grail, the mother lode. Good luck catching a fish back there."
Yeah, even if they're back there, good luck.
good luck. I mean,
yeah.
It's almost impossible to catch fish when they've got 2 or 3 million of the right thing that moves exactly the right way. It's got the right color. It's got the right scent, and you're throwing your little bait. There are times when you might catch a few, but boy, I've spent a lot of hours trying to figure that out, and I think you're better off to get several hundred yards out of that concentration. You may not need to leave that whole area. There's probably fish somewhere in that area,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd actually move out away from those shad and fish whatever looks good around that stuff, because sometimes that's what the bass are doing. They're kind of set up. Those shad are not going to be in that spot for very long. Typically, I mean, they're going to be moved. They'll drift several hundred yards one way and move around and stuff. And a lot of times you may see them at point A, but the bass will be at point B, set up on structure or cover. And as soon as those shad kind of start drifting over the structure or cover, that's when the bass are going to take advantage of that. So you can kind of find that stuff and fish that stuff before the shad have covered it all up. They're waiting for the groceries to come to them.
Yep.
If you're the groceries, you're going to catch some of those fish. But man, it's a battle.
I've got 3 or 4 schools located over here that's exactly what they do. And they'll sit on an area for a month or two sometimes. I mean, yeah, they'll have a home range, but they'll stay in that area. And then when the shad do come through, they they chow down on them. But and then in the winter time, a lot of times that's when I'll see these fish here anyway. That's when I'll see them really elevate up into the shad, and you see the shad balls with the big holes in the shad with the bass in the middle of them. I'll see that more later in the year.
Yeah, Tom,
so
I
yeah,
think
bunch of good fishing coming.
Top, what was the average age of the top 5 open EQ qualifiers? I think was like 22 years old or 23 years old or something.
Wow.
And then the top.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, the 9 that qualified, I think the average age was like 26. And that was because Ben Milliken was in the mix, and he's in his early 30s.
But he's a first timer, though.
He's a first timer. But that just shows you the influence of forward-facing sonar, YouTube, social media, and the times that we're living in. It's just
learning curves are a lot shorter.
Yeah, learning curves are cut for sure. You don't have to spend days and months and years learning a certain technique when you can just watch a video and figure out what to buy and just buy that stuff and go out and learn how to do it right. Forward-facing sonar is a crutch. It can be. I mean, it's not if you're not. It's not if you're Trey. I mean, let's see here. Yeah, it ain't going away.
Yeah,
it ain't going away.
The other thing I noticed too,
what's up, June?
So what's up, June? The other thing I noticed with forwards, just take a forward sonar away. How a lot of these young guys, what their what's the right word? What their plan of attack or their business plan was to qualify for the elites was very similar. And they got some really unwarranted bad, not bad press, but some bad social media comments, because a lot of these young kids, they are supported from a very young age by their family, and their family makes it a priority for these kids to get in situations where they can learn. They give all these kids every opportunity to succeed. The kid still has to do the work. I mean, you can't. What's Swindle say the other day? You can't replace desire.
Mm-hmm.
But all these families are, hey, we're gonna bankroll you. We're gonna provide you with everything you need. You got to do the work. And these kids that you see qualifying are the kids that a lot of them have been given this opportunity, but they've also put in the work, and they've done what they need to do, what anyone would need to do, to fully take advantage of their situation. And I mean, these guys that are going in, I mean, they're all in. I mean, and they have been for a lot of years. It's just this year they just got their reward for all everything they've been working for.
Yeah, like what you said earlier, Trey is going to do good in a tournament whether he's got forward-facing sonar on his boat or not. And 95% of the people that Cody Huff, I mean, come on. You go down the list. All those guys
all put the work in.
They were kicking everybody's butt before they had forward-facing sonar, and they would continue to do it. It's more than just that. That just makes it more efficient. And that's why if that's your job to be a professional tournament fisherman, you got to use all the tools or you're going to get left behind.
100%.
If you're allowing somebody to be right, if you're allowing one of your competitors to be more efficient than you, that just doesn't make sense. It does not make sense at all. If you're still typing on a typewriter and somebody's got a whatever, the next level, I mean, I don't know. It's just the whole thing is just a silly argument. I understand both sides of it, but it's you still got to catch them, and the people that are catching them with it can still catch them without it. And I see comments all the time about well, if they pulled that off their boat, they wouldn't do any good in a tournament. That's not true. That's not true at all. You still got to know where to look. You got to catch them. It's a technique just like any other thing that you're doing. The art of landing your bait within a foot of a fish every time, most of the time would not even looking up. They're looking down. I watched Jake do that. He's not even looking up. He's looking at that fish and he's throwing and dropping it right on his head and knowing exactly how long to let the bait sink. And it's fluid. That comes from thousands and thousands of hours of working on that certain technique. And then being disciplined, knowing where to look. It's a category on its own. It's no different than, a successful glide bait fisherman, a successful jig fisherman. It's like its own entity. So it's an art. There's no doubt about it. Everybody's got it and not everybody's winning with it.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah. I'm going to slide down some of these comments here. Yeah, Lure Lab, we'll get off this, but it's not about the need to spend thousands of dollars. It's about leveling the playing field with your competition and stuff. And then if you're just a recreational fisherman, it does cut down the learning curve. There's been several people comment in the past of, I've heard the comment, I'm an older fisherman, or I'm just getting into fishing. I want to be as efficient as possible. And this tool has helped me find and catch more fish and have more fun.
Especially the crappie world.
The crappie world. Yeah. Taking like I took Sophia out several months ago. First time she'd ever seen live scope. It was so fun to watch her watch the bait and watch the fish react to it. And that was enjoyment to me. I mean, I've caught fish without it, and I'll catch fish without it if I need to, but I don't know. There are people that probably lean on it too much that maybe wouldn't be as good without it. Some of the newer, younger guys, but that all comes out, man. That all shakes out. If you're a tournament
in a season on the elites, because you're gonna have to do it all.
You're not gonna make it. You're not an elite angler if there's no elite anglers that cannot catch fish without any electronics.
Yeah, exactly.
You can put them in a John boat and they're going to kick your butt.
They still kick our tail on Wednesday nights.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I'm just glad. I just hope all of his elite tournaments are during our Wednesdays where you can't come and take our money.
Yeah. Let's see. When electronics can see fish on the bottom, things will really change. Yeah, you're right. Those fish can still suck tight to the bottom, and they are hard to see.
That's what I've been working on.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Trey is. I'm not sponsored by any electronics company, and Trey is a Lowrance guy, and he was talking about forward sonar. He loves his Lowrance, and the reason he does is because he thinks he can see the fish on the bottom better than the Garmin. I think the Garmin overall is better. And I upped to the active target 2 on my big boat. And that is exactly what I've been working on. I have found a couple new schools on Egypt because of that. Stuff I think I glossed over before. And here's the cool part, though. Here's what's the fun part. Is as you get better at one segment of your electronics, you can use that to get better at your other stuff. And by that, I mean, for me, I've been able to find some fish that are just pegged to that mud bottom, right? I would have never noticed before. There's large groups of fish that do this, at least on a couple of the lakes here. And I've learned to see some of that on my active target. And I'm like, okay, I'm put trolling motor up. I want to side scan this now or down scan it. And what can I see that's different? And I've gotten better at my side scan now because, okay, now I know there's something there. So now I need to play with my side scan, maybe adjust my settings, or again, don't be afraid to hit the buttons. You're not going to break it. You can always go back to the factory settings. And I've gotten better at side scan because I've seen more on forward sonar. So now I know I need to go back and up my game on my side scan. It's really helped a lot with those fish that are pegged on the bottom. And now what Hunter said, Hunter, I think it was, said there are times I just get on and you can't really see them. We've all been looking at that thing. All of a sudden the fish just appears. But there are hints down there that you can pick up on.
Yeah, this comes up a lot too, about the price of forward-facing sonar.
Yeah.
And you remember when you were a kid and you wanted a new bicycle, and you cut grass for the summer,
or a new ball glove.
Yeah, you took all that money.
Yep.
And you hid it under your bed or put it in your sock, and at the
your
end of the year,
would steal it.
Yeah, we needed to hide it better than that. But you worked hard and you saved a little money, or you sacrificed.
Yeah.
And then you got something that you really wanted. That's the way I feel about electronics. If you really want a piece of equipment, you can find a way. You can sacrifice. You can just going out to eat once a week. Say you go to the Mexican joint down the road. We spend $40 going there. That's for 4 of us. If you just cut that out a couple times a month, and then cut out a few other things and saved a little money, pinched a little money off of, some little overtime money here or whatever. If you got serious about wanting to get whatever it is, a new rod and reel combo, a new graph or whatever, most people, not everybody, but most people could make it happen if they really wanted it to happen. You just have to sacrifice. You'd have to maybe cook eggs and toast for breakfast instead of spending $9.99 at McDonald's every morning, 5 days a week. Just do that for a couple months, and you're getting a lot closer to it. So,
and honestly, the forward sonar has gotten, compared to everything else, really isn't our most expensive thing on the boat anymore.
Right.
I mean, hell, the trolling motors are $4,000. Just for the new. I'm not sure on the Minn Kota. 3,500, $4,000, whatever the new Minn Kota is, the brushless. Power pole trolling motor is $5,000.
Yeah.
My Lowrance Ghost is, what is it, 3,800, or I don't know what it is. My HDS Live 12, the new Pro one, hell, that was $3,000. I can get forward sonar for $1,500. Hell, that seems cheap these days. Oh, spinnerbait, a good spinnerbait costs $10.
It is a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but I
get it.
It's achievable if you really.
I mean, yeah, it's just the world we live in. Unfortunately, I wish we'd go back, but
yeah,
it just is what it is, and it ain't gonna go. It's not gonna change. So probably just get worse.
Yeah, you're right, Stephanie. She just thinks about young kids who want to be a pro fisherman but can't afford all the electronics, and mom and dad can't afford it.
Yeah, no, that's true, and and guys like Trey are fortunate. They had parents that could afford to do whatever, and but to the parents' credit, they did, and the kid took full advantage of it. So you can't really be mad at it. It's life ain't fair. It just isn't fair. Everything's not equal and everything's not fair. So, but if a kid wants to learn to fish bad enough, he can find a way. He can find a way to learn to fish.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. Because that stuff that he's doing without the electronics is stuff that a person, he or she, needs to work on.
Yeah.
And just be getting better and better. And then
stuff you got to learn anyway.
You got to learn it. And it's not necessary. What's up, JB? Still got your name next to my name on here in honor of you. I hope you shoot that 12 or 14 or whatever you're after.
The 30-pointer.
The 30-pointer.
The 30-point buck. I'm surprised I haven't heard that song yet this year. It's usually about this time of year I hear that song.
I have never caught enough smallmouth in a year, Phil. I'm always up for some smallmouth. This might be the year where I jump back in the boat with you. We had fun that day. That was a good time. I've caught quite a few smallmouth
the other day.
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had fun. I'm glad he jumped on there. I had fun seeing JB the other day. I went and scanned an area. I said, hey, man, they're over on this point, whatever. Because I just scanned that. They weren't there. I was like, well, they're there now. We ended up fishing, him and myself and Hammy all ended up fishing. I think we scared the whole school away. We were talking so much, but it was a good time.
Yeah, I'd agree, Lure Lab. Day in and day out, the small stuff. I mean, day in and day out, a shaky head's going to catch more fish than a Chad.
Yeah.
That bigger
100%.
stuff's pretty specific.
Yep.
Yeah, Steffi says she can catch dinkers in the fall, but has trouble with the bigger fish. Fall's tough, man. Fall's just tough for everybody. It can be really tough. It's there can be some magical days, but there can be days when I would say, in my opinion, covering a lot of water in the fall until you find an area that looks right. I mean, I'm just thinking about grass fishing and let's say a frog. Right now, people want to throw a frog. The grass is good. Well, there's literally 7 miles of shoreline to fish, and it all looks good. Well, you'll run out of time if you start fishing from point A and just go as long as you can. You might run across a fish, you might not. But what I tend to do is I start earlier in the fall. I kind of start looking at the main lake grass first, and then as the water cools down, usually you can start catching some fish back further in the coast to some of the flatter stuff in the back. But even then, just focusing on the grass that's got activity, that's got some life. If you're fishing down the bank for a little bit and it's just kind of dead and quiet in the grass,
you don't hear the grass popping or anything.
Yeah, you're not seeing. You'll see little minnows kind of shooting out of the grass, shad kind of shooting out of the grass. If you're not seeing some kind of life, you're probably better off to go move. I mean, you may still catch some fish. Maybe it's just a traditional area that holds fish and they're just not active. But I'm usually going to move on. And when you get in an area that's got some life and it just feels like there's some stuff going on, that's an area where I may try a couple different color frogs, and I may punch or I may pull out a little bit and throw something off the grass, but I'll spend a little more time in that area because it just seems like it has the necessary ingredients to hold some fish. But all that, there's a lot of dead water in between, and like you were saying earlier, there's fish in all different depths. And if the shallow fish are not biting, sometimes you got to slide out and try something a little bit deeper. Maybe the deeper fish are feeding.
Yep.
But it's tough. It can be tough. One thing that you kind of touched on last time you were on here, I thought it was an interesting topic. And we kind of want to touch on the actual fall transition, but we had a little discussion about, is there even a fall transition? I mean,
that's a great question. Yeah, and I'm one of those that has kind of it's taken me a while, but I've kind of taken everything that I thought I knew. The older you get, the more you realize you don't know about a lot of things in life, including fishing. But I've kind of taken all that stuff and I've just kind of put it on a shelf. It's like, undecided. Like this whole, on a man-made reservoir, the migration, quote unquote, into the creeks. I can't say I'm seeing that on forward sonar or on my electronics in general. I see fish move. But then I also see fish that become available, and there's a difference. Now, if you've got a back of a cove and that has fish that live there, okay, let's say it's got a bunch of weeds or whatever, it's got cover to hold fish for the summer. Maybe it's got enough depth in the middle of the cove or whatever. And let's say there's a resident population of fish there, but you don't really have access to them because of the cover. Maybe it's gigantic weed mats or whatever it is. Then in the fall, the weeds start to break down, and you can get to those. Now you can get to those fish, or those fish start to move. So what happens a lot, you go back into an area like that, and then the shad, that have been living in the grass, they start to mingle around, and they're everywhere, and all of a sudden you start catching fish back in that stuff. And the old fisherman in me would have said, "Oh, they migrated from the main Lake Creek back here," and and I'm not. Sometimes I think it's just fish that have lived there are now catchable, or maybe they were fish like we're talking about, those fish sitting in the mud. There's been a whole school of fish there the whole time sitting in the mud, and you just never really knew they were there. And now they're moving around, and there's a million different examples like that. And bottom line is, I just don't know. I don't know. And I don't know if it's really important to know, because at the end of the day, with our technology, and I know some of there's the negative thing. Bottom line is, we can see if there's fish there or not. And we don't have to know where they came from. We just have to know that they're there. And so, yeah, I don't know about all the traditional migration. I think there is eventually some migration later in the winter that is kind of forced upon the fish. But this whole, I just don't know. They do move, but I don't know if there's some coordinated thing that happens. I think it's kind of a bunch of different things all happening at once.
Yeah, I think there's something to exactly what you said. And we don't have as good of a reference for that happening as if we lived on a really big body of water.
Right.
That had
we're not on Kentucky Lake every day, or Pickwick, or Lake of the Ozarks. Our lakes are so small, it kind of becomes spot specific,
Yeah. But I think even in Kentucky Lake, and Darius is on here. Maybe he could answer this, but I'm not so sure that maybe in the spawn, the fish will spawn in the very backs of the bays and then move out to the channel ledges, like the main river ledges that are just out in front of those bays.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really super far. I mean, it's a decent swim, but it's not something that they can't make in a couple hours. They can just swim it along at 2 miles an hour or whatever. But I would still say, if there's a decent creek channel going into that bay, and let's just take a bay that's 100 acres. Well, let's go 50 acres, which is not a huge bay. It's some of the bays in Kentucky Lake are like the size of Cedar. They're just, you could spend all day fishing in them. But you just take a 50-acre cove, which is a pretty good sized cove, and it's got a defined creek channel in it. I don't really think those fish are going to leave that whole cove. I don't think they're really going to migrate a long distance. The migration is going to be just maybe from the drop. Maybe there'll be a higher concentration on the drop at certain times of the year, and then maybe there'll be some up in 3, 4, 5 foot of water sometimes of the year. But I think they kind of stay in that general location, and I think that's what we see in our lakes around here. There's fish in just about any part of the lake at any time, and I would say maybe there will be more bait move into certain areas that maybe will activate those fish and make them a little more aggressive. Or like you said, maybe the grass will break down and expose those fish a little bit more. but it's hard to tell. It
is hard to tell.
I don't really know, but like you said, when we're out there looking around, there's always fish in just about every area.
Every day we
may
go
not be
out.
catching them,
Yeah.
and if we weren't seeing them, we would say, well, there's just no fish in here, and then we come back when the water cools down, and all of a sudden we're catching them. Well, we think those fish just moved into that area, but they were probably in that area the whole time. They just weren't biting, or they were, like you said, they were sucked to the bottom in the mud, and they just, we just weren't throwing at them. And it's definitely changed a lot of the theories that we have on fish.
Yeah, it's just I'm just basically under the opinion I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a better place to be than thinking I know and being wrong. So, and I guess as far as my fishing goes, it makes me not afraid to go try something different or off the wall that I may not have tried before because I thought I knew something when I really didn't. And again, getting back to the fall is a great time just to experiment. Your thermocline's going away, the bait's moving, the grass is slowly dying back. Things are changing, fish are moving or shifting, maybe is a better word sometimes. And just don't be afraid to experiment. And I think what you said a little bit too about covering water, you got to cover some water right now. Can't sit in one spot and die. It's an interesting time of year.
You ever fish with live frogs?
No, I've used live crawdads, but I've never used live. Have I told you my crawdad story?
No, I don't think so.
All right, I'll entertain for a minute and then I'll shut up. This is pretty good. This is Lake of the Ozarks. Okay.
Oh,
we used to take a spring vacation every bring our whole go to the Lake of the Ozarks, Osage Beach, Bass Point Lodge. And it was basically a little fishing resort, had some cabins, and they were nice enough for the women, my mom and my dad's brothers' wives. And, they felt like they weren't just being abandoned, which they basically were because we just all went fishing. But my Uncle Jim, who was fishing competitively at the time, Bass had just had a tournament on Lake of the Ozarks, and my uncle found out. And at that time, they weren't real careful about how they released the fish and all that. Anyway, my uncle found out where they released all the fish for this BASS event. This is back in the 80s in one cove.
Huh.
All of them. So we're like, first day we went to that cove, right? Well, we couldn't catch anything. Like, well, what the hell? So on our way in, of course, Dad and Uncle Jim and Uncle Tim, everyone had to go get their beer, and we ran by a bait shop. And one of them, I don't remember if it was my dad or Uncle Jim or somebody, said, I bet we catch some fish on crawdads. Because our family's always been big jig fishermen. So this live bait shop had crawdads. And I can remember the elders asking, well, how many crawdads do you have? And the guy said, 12 dozen. We got 12 dozen crawdads left. And they said, well, we'll take every one of them. So they got these coolers. And we go back. Women were really happy. So we go back to the lodge, and we got these coolers full of crawdads, right? We didn't know anything about how you're supposed to take care of them. So off we go fishing, and the fishing was off the hook. It was nuts. And back then, admittedly, we're putting them on stringers and big stringer photos, and we're eating them. And
yeah,
that sounds terrible now, but that's just what it was back in the early 80s or whenever this was. Well, as these crawdads stayed in the cooler, they started to die. We didn't realize they needed air. And so we had Crawdad Hotel. And so we dumped them all out inside the motel. We got crawdads crawling all over the place
in the room.
just kitchen floor, whatever. We didn't do anything about it. And my cousins and I, my cousin James and I, our job was to sort out the good ones from the bad ones. And that was our crawdad story. But it was one of the best fishing trips of my life to this day. And it's embarrassing how many fish we caught and how many we put to the fillet knife. But it was, we still, every Thanksgiving or whenever the family gets together, we still tell the story about the crawdads. Then I got in trouble. My cousin and I, of course, were, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years old. And they had a game room, an arcade with a pool table and a foosball table. And for some reason, we thought it would be fun to take the dead crawdads in the foosball table instead of the ball and the flicker. We did not get a Christmas card from the people at Bass Point Lodge after that.
Oh, that's fun, man. You got to do that stuff, though, man. That's part of growing up.
That's part of growing up.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
But no, I have not used a live frog.
I have a couple times. I remember fishing this subdivision lake, and I snatched up a little leopard frog that was just hopping along the bank, and I just put him out there weightless. I hooked him right between the legs, right in the back, and threw him out there. And he's out there swimming around. And I really meant, when you're young, you can't just let anything sit. You got to reel it in and throw it back out there, and just reel it in, throw it back out there. So I did that multiple times, and there was this big dark shadow that came up from underneath that frog. It was a giant catfish, and it just sucked that frog in and took it down. And I had it for a little bit, but I never got it in. But I do know, they work. A real frog will work for sure. And back to the crawfish, you're right, that's one of the best baits. If you go down like on the diversion channel around here, which runs off of the Mississippi River, those white bass will run out of the river and they run up that channel to spawn. You get there's specific little sandbars where they kind of just stage up. And if you go down to some of these ditches down south from here, they got these little irrigation ditches, the farming ditches. There's always a bunch of crawfish in there. When I was young, we used to take we had a wire basket that was on a really long dowel rod and just throw it out there and drag it. And you'd get so many crawfish. You just put them in a bucket with a bunch of grass and just a little bit of water at the bottom, and then go fish for those white bass. Just a split shot rig, just casting it out and reeling it in just super slow. And man, you would catch one right after another. It was a blast. And I don't think that you would have had the same success if you were throwing like a little jig or something. There's just something about a crawfish it's probably the best bait for fish all around. They can't pass up crawfish.
Yeah.
Especially that right size, that 2 to 3 inch crawfish. If it's light green where the shell is really soft, it's even better if you can keep it on your hook. But they won't pass it up.
Well, they definitely work at Lake of the Ozarks. I can tell you that.
Sounds like there's your answer, Brad. I'll be throwing some live crawfish down there at Lake of the Ozarks. It's fishing pretty good. They've had a lot. Lake of the Ozarks has had a ton of pressure. I don't know if you've looked at all the tournaments that have been down there. It's just been one after. Yeah, and there's the BFL regional.
Ozarks is back on everyone's rotation.
Yeah, it's just been getting hammered. This weekend there's the BFL regional. Then the following weekend I think it's the following weekend, the Anglers in Action championship. Then there's some other stuff down there. It's basically for like a month and a half they've had a big tournament every weekend. Even last week there was the Warrior William, which had 100 boats. There was there was a USA Bassin. I think there was some kind of Joe Bass tournament. There was a bunch of tournaments going on.
Well, I think that wasn't the Bass Open in the Toyota back to back weekends, because like Todd Castledine and them stayed to fish both.
Yeah, and then the Big Bass Bash was right behind that. That's like 3,500. I think they had 3,500 entries in the Big Bass Bash.
Golly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they still
that's
bite.
what's going on a lot of our lakes. That's the negative thing about the growing popularity of tournament fishing.
Yeah.
It's they just need to be careful. I mean, I'm all for tournament fishing, obviously, but sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. We need to have a little common sense, they're going to have, at some point, they're going to have to just keep an eye on the resource and not overdo it.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, I think Bass is just licking their lips with Milliken making it. I mean, that's one of the best things that could happen because a lot of his fan base is not tournament minded.
Not tournament based.
They're just normal fishermen, out there
A lot
having fun.
A lot of the YouTube stuff is not necessarily tournament based.
Right. I'd say, yeah, you're right.
And
so to bring that audience.
Yeah, like Stephanie, loves to fish more than anyone, but she's not a tournament person. And sometimes I get off on this tournament tangent when I'm on here, and it has absolutely nothing to do with a lot of what people do.
Right. Yeah, I'm the same way. I just fished enough tournaments to talk about them, but most of my time I'm just out there fun fishing. But yeah, Milliken's going to bring a whole new audience to tournament fishing, and that's going to be future tournament entries paid by some of Milliken's fans. So Bass is loving it. So good for Ben, man. Good for Ben.
He made a nice comeback to get in.
He made it very interesting. He really did.
Yeah, because he had dropped down to, I can't remember. He had dropped down to like 17th or 18th after being in the top 10 for a while, and then made a nice comeback. He earned it. He definitely earned it. Randy.
Randy, still trying.
Randy, I don't disagree sometimes a lot with what he says. I just don't like how he says it. He could get the same message across. It's perfectly fine to be against forward sonar. I get it. Just package your message a little bit differently, and I think he would get a little less hate. But whatever. That's enough about Randy.
Yeah, he's using it to his advantage for sure. Yeah. My opinion.
Yeah, it's not a genuine thing sometimes, I don't think.
Right.
Have you got on a good frog bite yet?
I have, just not really big fish. I've been fishing Kincaid a little bit. I've been fishing Kincaid a little more.
At Cedar yesterday. I get into an area, kind of traditional spots where I've caught them before, and I could get bites, but they weren't I didn't stay there and pound them because I'm getting ready for a tournament, but I got some bites, and I never caught an over with the frog. And I've been more judicious with it, and but once I got an area, then I would leave it. But still, I never did catch an over.
Did you go Friday or Saturday? Did you fish Friday or Saturday when that front was moving through in the rain?
I fished in the afternoon of the club challenge out here, so that would have been Saturday. I waited because there was a club challenge on Egypt, so I didn't want to get in all the tournament guys' way, and so I went out at about 2:00 on Saturday, and they were biting. They were biting really good for me, and I had a good Saturday afternoon. Then let's see. Sunday I didn't fish, and then yesterday I went to Cedar.
Okay. Well, because that would have been the day. The Friday and Saturday would have been the day to throw that frog and catch a better fish in the grass. From my experience, those are the kind of days that you wait on in the fall, where you can have just some really phenomenal days. But yeah, I've the days that I've caught some fish on it recently, they haven't been big fish. I mean, I've had a fish or two sniff it. That was a good one that roll up on it, but I've missed them. But I had a day not too long ago where I caught quite a few fish on it. They were just 14, 15, 16-inch fish. They weren't like, 18, 19, 20-inch fish.
Right.
But I don't care.
Oh, if you're fun fishing, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like I had this conversation with JB, and we've had this conversation before. You take the tournament out of it, like a lake like the lake that's got a slot limit, that's an 18-14 slot, a 14-18 slot. We're so hyper focused on catching 18 to 21-inch fish that we kind of forget that we're still catching 3.5 pounders that are 16, 17 inches, or just a 16-inch fish is still a pretty decent fish. Or
there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
you're not doing anything wrong when you catch a 16 or 17 incher.
Right.
But because of that slot, we get this weird sense that we need to go do something. How about that tournament you and I fished a couple springs ago on the chatterbait?
Yeah.
I bet we caught 30 that were 17 inches, but yet we thought we had a bad day. It's like, it's just a slot, you know, and
it's still a 15-pound bag or so, just on 3 pounders.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then how many times have we thought those, like all these 17 and
they'll all be 18 next year.
They're all going to be 18 inches next year.
Yeah. Then where do they go?
They never show up. I don't know what happens to them.
They're 18 inches somewhere.
I think they just stop growing. They're like, okay, guys, we're about to get over that bubble. We need to go on the salad diet or something and quit growing. Yeah, you're right. There's so many more people that bank fish than tournament fish. And gosh,
done a bunch of that in my life too, and it's fun.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah. And I think Andy was talking about when we're on the bank, we want to throw as far as we can out to the middle of the lake, and then when we're on a boat, we want to
throw up on the bank.
Yeah, it's
kind of funny. Yeah, it's true though. It's very.
It
true.
Is.
Our grass is always greener.
That's right. What are your thoughts on tournament co-anglers dealing with forward-facing sonar? Well, I've had my fair share of that. And it depends on what your boater is fishing. 2 scenarios. One would be the scenario that I experienced a couple weeks ago, where the guy I was fishing with was really targeting specific pieces of cover, and he was making precise casts. There were still fish around, but he was making a few casts, and a lot of times just leaving pretty quickly. So not all the time. He did soak an area for 10 minutes here and there, but a lot of the time it was just 2 or 3 minutes and you're moving. That's tougher because you don't have a chance to really.
Yeah, you can't be target specific like that from the back of the
boat. You're just fan casting, you're randomly casting, and the way that he was catching them, they were wanting to come up for a bait, and he was having to put the bait like a foot above their head and come right over the top of them. Now, I drug stuff behind him, stuff that I've had, a lot of confidence in the past, and I had a few bites, caught a few fish. But what he was doing was the thing to be doing, and I couldn't do it from where I'm at. Another scenario is Table Rock Lake or Bull Shoals or a highland reservoir where you're fishing out over 60, 70, 80 foot of water, and they're targeting suspended bass on whatever bait, a Demiki rig, a spoon, an A-rig, whatever. That is a whole nother deal. You're totally, you just feel like you're casting out in the middle. It's one thing when you're shallow and you may not be fishing the juice, but you're still able to throw your bait out and drag around and you're bumping stuff and you feel like you could get bit at any moment. But when you're 200, 300 yards off the bank and you're just throwing out in 60, 70, 80 foot of water, that is another mindset. So there's two different kind of scenarios. Actually the Table Rock scenario where your guy is fishing those suspended fish, I ask a lot of questions. I ask them, how deep are you seeing the fish? How deep is the bait? A lot of times you're fishing around treetops. how far up are the trees coming up off the bottom, because I don't want to be getting hung. If they're throwing an A-rig with 3 hooks on it above treetops, and you try to do that and you can't see your A-rig sink, you're going to be getting hung up a whole lot, or whatever bait it is that you're throwing. You're going to get hung up a lot. And that creates 2 problems. A, that's a $25, $30 bait that you're breaking off. B, you're asking him to go back and try to get it undone. It takes a lot of time. So you don't want to be doing that. But I've always asked those guys, hey, how deep are the fish? What direction? What direction are you you can watch what area they're casting in, but I just ask a lot of questions, and most guys are fine with that. But it is difficult. I would say one of the hardest people to fish behind is somebody that is covering water fast with a crankbait or something, and they're 10 feet off the bank, and they're really
paralleling the bank.
They're making that parallel cast, and you don't have anything to fish. A, you're fishing used water, but B, you've only got 10 feet from here to the bank to fish that used water. So I would take the forward-facing sonar person over that guy any day, because at least you feel like you're going to get lucky.
Do most of those guys leave the back electronics on for you to see depth or side scan or anything like that?
Some of them do. Yeah. Some of them do.
Okay.
Yeah, that helps. That helps a lot. It really does. I don't know. It's just a different game in the back of the boat. I used to not like fishing docks, out of the back of the boat, fishing docks. People that like Lake of the Ozarks, where there's 70,000 docks, that can be tough too, because your guys fishing the front of the dock, he's hitting the corner, then he's hitting the front, and then he's hitting the side, and then he's going down and he's hitting the walkway in the back, and then he's coming back out on the trolling motor and going to the next dock and doing it, and that's what he's fishing. So that can be really fast. I used to not like that, but I figured out that those fish will still bite even if your boat is past that dock. And as the guys kind of going in and picking some stuff apart, you can throw out off the front of that dock that you just passed and let it soak. If you can feed out some line and let it really sit, you'll pick up some fish that he passed up. And definitely don't throw the same bait most of the time. If he's flipping a jig, throw a tube or throw a shaky head or something, and that'll get you some bites. But yeah, I don't know. Fishing on the back of the boat is different.
Now, do they allow if the guy was ingenious enough, do they allow the co-angler to bring a portable live scope?
There's been talk about that. And yeah, I mean, because the ice fishing units, it would be capable.
That's all it is.
Yeah. If you had a really like a 20-volt battery, you could do it. It would be an extra thing that you would have to pack. You'd have an extra thing to take care of. If you had a way to drop it over the side of the boat. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen anybody do it yet. I'm sure some people probably have, but it's been talked about for years. And I don't think that I would ever do it, because the thing is you get to your spot and then you got to set it up. And then when your boater's ready to go, he's usually ready to go. He's
may
usually
not have time.
One more cast and then we're going.
Yep.
And then you got to pick it back up. You got to get your life vest on. It's just a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. You don't want to slow him down.
Yeah. Now, I mean, if I knew we were going to fish just a couple areas and we would be at those areas for an hour, say he's going to have his trolling motor in the water for an hour or two, or even 30 minutes, yeah, it might be worth it. But when you're fishing 40, 50, 60 spots a day, it's just going to be a burden for sure. Let's see what else we got on here. Okay, here's a question. When do you want to match the hatch, and when do you want to stick out?
That's a great question. I don't think there is an answer yes or no. Do it then or don't do it now. I think that's something that's always got to be in the back of your mind. Experiment. For instance, on the underspin, a lot of us will throw an underspin in the shad balls and stuff. And if you got one that's the exact size of the shad and, it's a really good imitator, sometimes that doesn't work. maybe just because there's a sheer number of shad that you're dealing with. I've got some underspins that have chartreuse blades underneath them for that reason. Also, if I'm fishing deeper. So yeah, I don't think there's a concrete answer to that, but I think it is something someone should be aware of and experiment with, and have a plan. And what's interesting, I'm fortunate. I get to fish all the time, so I've got on my local lake. I might have at times, depending on what's going on, I might have half a dozen different schools located. And Gabe knows, he's fished some of these schools with me. Some of these schools are 200, 300, 400 fish. I mean, I'm very fortunate to be able to play with those. They're basically my pets. I mean, really. But on the same day, one school will act a certain way. You'll go to another school of fish in a similar area, and they act totally different. And so it's like fish have personalities, which is no doubt, but these groups of fish can have a personality too. And you just have to be aware of that. And there's not going to be a right or wrong answer to that question. But I guess you got to be ready to try both. And
what's your typical rotation? Like, say you locate these fish in schools this time of the year. How do you go through a rotation of baits? What's your process of figuring out how to get those fish to bite?
I've got several baits that I like, and I've continually trying to experiment to find, because these offshore fish are getting fished for more and more and more. I'm always trying to find something oddball that maybe the next guy isn't throwing. But one thing that hasn't died as far as working, now we can't use it a lot in our tournaments, but the A-rig. I mean, it's just, if you're fishing them and you can't get them to bite, that's the thing I throw last, because I just don't want to throw it all day. Some days I'll get in the mood and I'll throw it all day, but the A-rig, if you want to bite, the A-rig more times than not is going to be the one thing that'll get those fish to trigger.
It just fires them up, man. It's something about it.
It's a great tool. It just is.
Yeah.
And and they've seen that bait for a long time now too, and they still eat it. I had a good A-rig. You asked me if I fished Saturday. I broke out the A-rig for about an hour, and they didn't want to spoon as much. They didn't want to look down, and that A-rig I could just take through them, and they were smoking it on Saturday. But I'll throw a white spoon or a silver spoon. I don't get one color or the other. If it's sunny, a lot of times it's a silver spoon. A white one will usually work. Sometimes a Carolina rig is a good sneaky tool if they're towards the bottom, especially if it's a rougher bottom. Sometimes some of these lakes you can't throw an A-rig the way you want to. Maybe there's rules against or whatever. Big 3/4 or 1 ounce spinner bait. I had some that were made up, got 3 blades on them. It's kind of my pretend A-rig, basically. Yeah. I'll throw a big spinner bait sometimes through them. You can throw it a long way. On the other side of the scale, a Ned rig. A Ned rig is a great fish bait. So you just got to have an open mind. But you're asking me what my rotation is, it's a spoon, it's an A-rig, and then if they're being weird, I'll throw something small at them like an Ned rig.
What about an underspin? When would you throw an underspin?
I forgot. Yeah, that underspin's part of that. And also, I don't throw it more than I do down here. Spy bait. No. Spy bait can be a really good. And then along those lines, if they've slowed down a lot later in the year and the water's getting cold, of course, a jerk bait.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. But right now, this, 60, 70 degree water, I'm not screwing around a lot. Spoons, I like spoons because I get to set the hook. And,
Yeah.
But a lot of times they won't hit it. Now, as it gets colder, they'll hit that spoon better. A lot of them are elevated off the bottom right now, so that A-rig really is hard to beat. A crankbait, if they're at the depth where a crankbait will get to them, or just above them, just a crankbait of any kind. You get it down to them. That's the thing. Sometimes these fish are a little too deep for a crankbait, but
Here's
spoon, if I had a choice, it's spoon.
Here's a serious question. Here's a serious question from Phil.
Hey, I got a new one, Phil. I'm gonna go grab the box. I don't remember the name of it. The Phil's a bourbon drinker. I got a good new one. I'll be right back.
Yeah. That's what was cool about that Warrior William tournament. The raffle giveaways. They had a lot of really good raffle giveaways. A couple of the baskets were just a basket full of different kinds of bourbon. There was another one with different kinds of wine.
Phil.
They had
you owe me for this
really
one. Phil, I don't know. I'm not a.
Let me put you on solo here. Let's see so we can really see this.
Okay.
William Green?
Millum and Green.
Millum and Green. Okay.
Millum and Green. Anyway, it's out of Texas. And, typically you don't think of, I think one of the distilleries in Tennessee might help them, but it's shipped out of Texas. And it's a 86 proof bourbon. So it's a light hitting bourbon. A lot of times what happens, when the lighter proofs tend to be less in flavor. This is wonderful. And you can tell it's empty, and I have to order some more. You can order it online. But Millum and Green was sent to me by my cousin, and it's a winner if you're looking for a new one.
You ever had any of that apple pie moonshine?
Never.
Okay, that's a good thing. That's good. I had a conversation with somebody over the weekend about that stuff, and they were doing their best to stay vertical instead of horizontal because they had taken a couple too many swigs off of that.
Yeah, I'm not. See, those days are behind me. Thank God.
Yeah, that's pretty hard. A couple
bourbons of the evening, and a beer or two, and that's about it for Uncle around anymore.
John says, "Why are buzzbaits and chapel style lures so popular on Lake of the Ozarks?" In my opinion, that's got to do with the really big gizzard shad. That's when that bite gets really good down there in the fall, and in the spring. You'll start seeing the gizzard shad. I'm talking 6 to 8 to sometimes 9 and 10 inch gizzard shad up there, really shallow, and they're feeding. They're eating the algae off of the rocks and stuff. And when you start seeing that happen, it's just a matter of time before the bigger bass get up there. And when those bigger bass are up there, they're aggressive. They're not up there to hang out. They're up there to feed. And you throw something like a big head knocker buzzbait or a plopper or a choppo or whatever over the top of them, they crush it. But I would say it's got to do with the size of the gizzard shad that they're feeding on, and that they're really shallow and they're aggressive and they're feeding and they want something big. And you're right, it works. It's weird how certain baits work really good in certain bodies of water, and they don't seem to excel in other waters. I mean, like a Damiki style rig. It's really strong in a lot of the highland reservoirs, even Kentucky Lake and stuff. But there's some lakes, like I've tried it at Cedar, and it doesn't seem to work as good. It's just, for whatever reason, certain baits work better on certain bodies of water. It's always been that. There's colors too. There's certain colors that will work really good on, like a motor oil or something, or some random color may work really good on some bodies of water, but they don't even look at it on other bodies of water for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's here locally. You see that Our lakes, some of our lakes are so different too. That's part of it. But you know, what works on crab orchards, which is a very shallow, muddy lake, isn't going to work on Devil's Kitchen and 80 foot in the trees and June Clearwater. It's just every lake's got its little thing, and that's kind of the fun part, really.
Scott says you're about 3 more years away from being able to think like a fish.
Wilkins. It's my old college buddy. He lives here on Lake of Egypt now. He couldn't stay away from me, so he came down here and bought his retirement home so he could be closer to Uncle Ron.
Smart man. Good fishing and good company.
He was the brains of the college operation. I was the fishing guide / let's drive to the bar. Yeah, old Wilkins, he's a good dude.
Yeah, that's kind of that's funny. I didn't even see this comment, but RM Fishing says, have you ever found a specific color on a specific body of water that works better than anything you've ever thrown? In other words, how important is color in your opinion? Yeah, it is.
Color's not important until it is.
Yeah.
You know it?
I know. It was about 3 years ago when I went to Pyramid State Park for the first time. And I fished a green pumpkin type stuff, whatever it was, a crawl, worm, jig, or whatever. And I wasn't getting a lot of bites. And then I put on a black and blue. And for whatever reason, they were hammering the black and blue. So in my opinion, in that area right there, in those strip pits over there, black and blues are really strong color, or at least the times that I've fished it. Now I've thrown a black and blue sometimes and not caught them, and I've caught a few on green pumpkin in there, but for whatever reason, they seem to be keyed in on that color. And there's some lakes where I think it's a daytime. A day thing on a color. There's some days where like Lake of the Ozarks. We're just talking about Lake of the Ozarks. There's times when I'll throw a green pumpkin out of the back of the boat for a long time. Like say I'm just fishing a shaky head worm, and I'm not getting bites, and I'll put June bug on, and boom, within like 5 minutes I start getting bites. You know, you always think you can catch a fish on green pumpkin no matter what. Well, maybe you can, but sometimes they like a June bug even better. But that's happened to me a lot of times, going from a natural kind of softer color to something that's more bold and stands out. And they want one or the other on a given day. So that's something you definitely have to check no matter what, what body of water you're on.
Yeah. And I agree. And I'm, as a fisherman, I stubbornly try to ignore getting too worried about color. I think for the most part that helps me, because what I'm trying to remember is where the fish, right? But that being said, there are days when the smallest variation of color or flake in a plastic, just at least it seems like that's the deal. And fish are weird, man. It's there's times when color is the difference between catching them and not. Fortunately, I don't think that's the majority of the time, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think the majority of the time there's specific hues that tend to be important. But if they're in a good enough mood, maybe the very specific whatever won't keep you from catching fish. But there are times when if you don't have it dialed in to whatever it is that they're wanting, then it's just like you said, man. They want one thing for some reason, and it just is what it is.
I've told this story before, but I haven't told it in a while. And I kind of touched on Pyramid State Park a while ago. I was out there a couple years ago, and I did a video on this, but I was fishing this spot, and I was throwing a shaky head. I was fishing that Hawgz Custom Baits 6 1/4, which is it's just a straight tail worm. You know, nothing fancy about the worm, other than he doesn't use salt in the plastic, so it kind of floats up, which is kind of nice. But it was a watermelon red worm, and I was throwing it on a 1/4 ounce head. I believe 10-pound test. That's not important. What is important is I caught a couple fish on it, good fish, 4-pound fish, and they tore the worm up. So I went to find another watermelon red worm, and I couldn't find them. I'm digging through all my stuff. I couldn't find them. Well, there was a bag of green pumpkin, the same worm. It's a Hawgz Custom 6 1/4. And I kind of set it out to the side, and I continued to dig and look for that watermelon red. Well, I gave up, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty dang close. I mean, watermelon red, green pumpkin. And it was a lighter green pumpkin. I'm like, that's pretty dang close. So I put it on there, same head, everything's the same. I chartreuse the toe, spike it, marker, just like I had the watermelon red. I throw it out. I'm spot locked. I got a waypoint. There's fish. They're still there swimming around. Cast, drag, cast, drag. 10, 15 minutes. Never got a bite. I'm like, that is weird. That is weird. I know they're there, though nothing's changed. So I reeled it in, and I'm like, I don't care if I got to dump everything out on the floor of my boat. I'm finding those damn watermelon red worms. It's my own fault. I got too much crap in there. And that's what I did. I dumped out over a couple tubs. And sure enough, I found that bag. There's like 3 or 4 worms in there. So I pulled that green pumpkin worm off, put the watermelon red worm on there, started the tail with the spike it marker, made like 1 or 2 casts, boom, another 4-pounder. And I ended up catching 3 or 4 fish within like 15, 20 minutes off of that spot. Now, that's one of those days where that little bit of fleck, the green pumpkin has the black fleck, which is kind of matte, dull. It doesn't really shimmer or anything. And the watermelon has the red fleck in it. And this is not clear water. This is like 2 foot of visibility, maybe 1.5 foot, and the wind was blowing too. So it wasn't like I'm fishing Table Rock where it's 15 foot of visibility, where the fish are really getting a good look at it. It was a scenario where you wouldn't think that little bit of a shade difference would come into play. And it really did. It really did. And the reason I know is because I was on spot lock. So I know I'm making that same cast, and I'm casting that at waypoint. So I drug that green pumpkin bait through the juice multiple times with nothing. And then as soon as basically I change that little bit of a color variation, I get a bite. So sometimes that's going on. And then sometimes, heck, it don't matter. I mean, you could put like a banana colored worm on there and they'll eat it, but you always got to pay attention to that. Sometimes there's days when they're just finicky. This is a pressured spot too. I mean, a lot of times that comes into play. It's kind of like going back to what you said earlier when we started this out about throwing a big bait or a small bait. There's a lot of stuff in the middle that gets thrown. There's a lot of stuff that's that same size, and there's a lot of the same color of that same size stuff. So a lot of times making a switch to something bigger, something smaller, or tweaking the color just slightly can get you a bite. And that's just something that you have to figure out on the fly. Okay, Phil's got another question. He says, it seems like the size of big bass in our lakes is dropping off. I think I might know the answer, but would like to hear your thoughts on that.
I have an answer. My opinion. Too many tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple. Excuse me. I'll grab a glass of water in a minute.
Well, I had the conversation. It's funny this came up. So I was talking to my buddy Greg about. I was actually talking about Ron and Cedar Lake in the 80s. There were multiple 8-pound bass caught, and Ron can verify this. But he, a lot of times in those night tournaments, it would take an 8-pounder to get the big bass. And it was not uncommon to catch 7 and 8 pound bass. So I kind of got in on the tail end of that. In fact, the biggest bass I've ever caught was an 8.4, and that was caught in the early 90s on Cedar Lake. There weren't as many tournaments back then. And now it's unheard of to catch an 8-pounder out of that lake. You know, you're usually a high 5, sometimes a low 6 is going to get you the big bass, where back in the 80s, early 90s, it was a low 8, you know, to get you big bass in a lot of those tournaments. So it's funny. I actually had this conversation with a buddy of mine. We were talking about the same scenario. And I think you'd mentioned something about not just the tournament pressure, but something about a slot limit. Is there a way that like a slot limit can maybe affect the upper range of a bass?
Yeah. Without trying to get too technical, a lake is only going to support so many pounds of fish per acre based on its health, you know, on its fertility, the amount of food. So, you know, whatever that is what it is, you know, unless the lake changes on an ecosystem level. But so anyway, enter Cedar Lake, which is our local lake that has a 14 to 18 inch slot. So what that's done, it's done its job. There's a ton of fish in the upper half of the slot. Well, there's a ton of fish in all the slot, but there's a large number of fish in that 16 to 17 and a half range. Well, they take up a big percentage of the amount of pounds that lake can support per acre. And I talked to the biologist about this because I was part of the reason that there used to be a 15-inch limit on this particular lake. And we were getting into a situation where we had too many small fish, so on and so forth. We wanted to get those fish up past that 15 inches. So the DNR listened and they implemented the slot. Well, the problem is that slot's been in place now forever. And in my opinion, there's too many fish in the slot. Now the lake's healthy. I talked to the biologist, Sean Hurst, who you've had on your show.
Mm-hmm.
And says, hey man, you know, you got this bell curve, and in the middle, we got this huge chunk of fish that's in that slot, but not as many of them are getting past the slot. And the other problem is the tournament pressure, because once they do get past the slot, they get thrown in a live well and whatever. That's another argument, though.
Yeah.
But I was talking to him about changing the nature of the lake limit in a way to reduce the abundance of fish in the slot to allow more fish the opportunity to get bigger. And he didn't disagree with me on the biology of it, but he also told me if he did that, he'd lose his job and I understand, because everybody can go to Cedar and catch a good number of those healthy 15, 16, 17, and occasional 18-inch fish and say they've had a good day. You know, we only poo-poo it because of our tournament perspective. But just going out there fun fishing, it's a blast, right? Mm-hmm. And they're healthy fish at that point. So it's kind of a, you know, it's a management style. It's not like the lake's in trouble, and so that's kind of the issue at this particular lake. And then the compounding factor is the tournament thing. Is I think we're killing some of those 4.5 to 5.5 pound fish in the tournaments. So there's, even once they get past the slot, which is a reduced number, then they're just having a hard time getting beyond that, those 7 and 8 pounders like we used to catch. And I think it's just the reality of and it's probably a similar story on a lot of lakes, I would assume.
It's got to be the tournament pressure then. I mean, yeah, I would think because
I think it's the Wednesday nighters, particularly on Cedar.
The forge base in the
middle of the summer. It's every single Wednesday, and and I hate to say it, but a lot of guys are not taking care of their fish the way they should. I even came on one of your live streams earlier in the summer. I said, "Hey guys, let's take care of the fish," and but some of them don't, and I don't know. They'll spend $1,500 on live scope, but they won't spend $2.50 on a bag of ice for their cooler for their fish. So
yeah,
it just doesn't. I don't understand that.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
I know this goes on. Be cognizant.
You're kind of locking up. It is a problem, but I think it's got to be the tournament pressure. It's got to be the tournament pressure, because you would think that. Well, first of all, you got the best fishermen in Southern Illinois fishing those tournaments. So if they were in there, somebody would be catching them. I mean, if there were some 8-pounders still swimming around, you've got however many boaters or however many people fishing that tournament that are good, doing the right stuff in the right areas at the right time of the year. They're gonna stumble across one of those fish, and it just doesn't happen. I mean, I think Ron caught a 7-something in a tournament last year, I think. But that's the biggest one that I've heard caught in quite some time. Like that 7-pounder you and Dale caught. That's the biggest one I've heard weighed in quite a while over there. I mean, maybe I'm missing.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I mean, you see some low 6s, but it's like 585 is a really good one. 590 something.
That's kind of the cutoff anymore for us.
Yeah.
That 7 I caught, it was 7. What was it? 7.18, I think.
It's a really big fish for that lake.
Yeah, and that's a 7-pounder is a good fish anywhere. I'm not.
Yeah, right.
But a 7-pounder, it was like I caught it, and guys were like, "Oh my God, there's someone caught a 7." Well, 15, 20 years ago, no one would have went ooh and ah. They said, "Oh, someone caught a 7." That's the difference.
Yeah, you know what? I've had a couple of those off the wall color baits that worked really good, and then you go to restock and they don't sell them anymore.
Yeah.
God, there's nothing more frustrating than that. And it's not just the color a lot of times, RM. I mean, it may be. A lot of times it's the confidence that you've built, yes, exactly, in that color. And you go switching brands, it may be really, really similar, but in your head it might as well be something totally different, and it's hard to get confidence in something new. But yeah, that's happened to me a lot.
I'll give away a color on cedar, and the only reason I'm going to give this color away is because you can't buy them anymore. Do you remember the biffle bug?
Mm-hmm.
Have you thrown that much with a hard head, wobble head?
I haven't.
It's a good bait, and but they have a color called mossy pumpkin, and it's freaking money, dude. Don't ask me why. And I'm not a color guy, so for me to be all in on a color, but I've seen it happen way too many times. And frickin', Gene LaRue got bought by, is it Pradco?
Probably.
Sure. All these
they own everything.
Swallowed up. But anyway, they got bought out by whoever. And this must be a color that they didn't sell a lot of, but they frickin' quit making it. My buddy Kyle, we went down to the Classic on Grand Lake in Oklahoma. What was that, last year? And we're of course, you go to a new lake or another lake that you go to all local tackle shops. Frickin' Kyle, he's the one who told me about the color. And he used to be sponsored by Gene LaRue. So at one point he had bags of this. Well, he found 4 on the peg and grabbed them and ran. We're like, "Where's Kyle?" we were
He's got him
wrestling
down.
over those damn
They're in his
things
underwear.
at our Airbnb the whole trip. Yeah, but it's just, I don't know why they do that. It's sometimes it's maddening. Sometimes it doesn't make a difference, but that's one that hurt.
Yeah.
Mossy pumpkin biffle bug. If you find one, a bag of that, buy it.
Okay. It's probably a color that didn't sell. Only a few people.
I'm sure they didn't discontinue their number one color. I mean,
yeah.
So,
what's the color?
For our particular lake, it worked, huh?
What's the Mille Lacs color that in the speed crawl, green pumpkin magic, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the color? Yeah. I was looking for those, and we couldn't find them anywhere. But the trip that I was making up there. Yeah, they were just gone.
Well, it was back in the middle of when you couldn't buy any tackle because everyone was out of everything. But that was one of the things everyone was out of. The other one that's good up there is that speed craw, that cherry one. I think they call it wild cherry. All the crawdads up there are red at a certain point of the year.
Oh.
You put that red speed craw on the back of the football head jig and then reel that back.
All those wild colors were made for a certain reason. You might be like, why is there a red speed crawl? Well, there's some lake.
There's a pro somewhere it fits something for that pro.
Yep.
And that's how they come to be.
And he ain't talking about it most of the time.
No, by the time we hear about it, to him it's old news.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of news, did you see that? It was in Colorado, I think it was, but some lady was riding a train, and she was. I think they were looking for elk or something, and she saw like this Sasquatch. Supposedly there was a Sasquatch in the grass, and she just got this random video and some photographs. Did you see any of that?
Sitting in the grass.
Yeah, sitting in the grass. Yeah. And there was
sure wasn't Matt Steffen on the train?
It might have been. He might have been chasing his roots. He might have finally, with all the money he won on the invitationals, he might have bought him
He's going to prove himself right on Bigfoot as much as he's been roasted by Bigfoot.
I saw that, and I don't know if it's the same footage, but there was another clip going around where it looked like a drone flying over it, and it probably was the same thing. They probably just figured out how to make it look like it was flying over, and I don't know. I'm not sold on it. It didn't look. It looked a little fake to me, just a little bit fake. But you never know. Big world out there.
Was that to start your giveaway?
Yeah, we got numbers coming now. Yeah, just snuck that in there. But when I was the last time I was in Estes Park, Colorado, there was actually a little write-up about somebody had saw a Bigfoot when they were camping out at the same time frame I was there. It was in like the local newspaper or something. Bigfoot sighting in the Rocky Mountain National Park or something, and it was just a little random. I can't remember the story, but they were camping and they saw something, and it kind of blew up from there. So I don't know.
A lot of these stories, people really do believe they saw something.
Yeah, like they tell them.
Matt Steffen said, he said, I saw something. Yeah. What it was, they don't know, but they saw something.
I mean, if you're not going to believe Matt Steffen seriously, then who are you going to believe? Because
nobody. Yeah,
he's obviously not a kook, and the way he tells it and he believes it, and he's got no reason to make that up. It doesn't.
And he wishes he didn't see it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a thousand stories like that out there. You listen to some of these podcasts, there's people that they're former military, they're former state troopers, they're EMT people, firemen. They've seen stuff. Some of the craziest ones are people that are actually out in the woods deer hunting, and they'll see a doe run up and stop right underneath their tree stand, just panting and panting and panting, and like it's been chased. And then they'll see this figure kind of moving towards them, and it's a Sasquatch, because supposedly a deer is one of their main food sources. and they'll look through the scope at the animal, and the people that are telling these stories, I mean, geez, they, like you said, they believe it. Whether they saw it or not, they believe they saw it. And
yep.
Seems legit. We don't have a winner.
It's hard for you, but he need JB there to go through all those numbers.
I know. This is what I really, really, really missing.
Way to go, JB.
Yeah. My vision is not what it used to be either.
Well, just pick Stephanie. She's going to win it anyway.
Hoping somebody doesn't have any Cumberland Pro Lure stuff wins.
Is that what you're giving away, Cumberland Pro?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to give away some jigs tonight.
That's cool.
Got a pretty good stash of them. Isaac wants to do a big giveaway sometime like Thanksgiving or Christmas, so we got to figure that out. People all around it. Oh, we got a winner. First one I saw. Andy. Congratulations. I got your address, I think. Send it to me anyway, just to make sure. Pretty sure I got it, but yeah, I'll get you some stuff out in the mail here in the next couple of days. Congratulations. There was like a 113, a 114, and everybody was all around it. All right. Any more questions about fall fishing before we wrap this sucker up? I'm going somewhere.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
Frog fishing, it's that time of year, right?
Right.
We've had several questions about colors. What about color as it pertains to the frog? Which you wouldn't think would make any difference for coming over a big map, but it sure does seem to make a difference.
It does. If I was going to pick one color in the fall, it's going to be a black frog. And second, it's going to be a brown, but a darker color. And I don't really know why. I just know that I've had some really good success on a darker colored frog in the fall for whatever reason.
Yep.
Something I've discovered over the last couple of years is in the low light conditions, and usually in the evening, that last 30 minutes. A white frog seems to work better for me. You would think a darker frog, and maybe a darker frog still does work, but I've had a lot of success on a white frog in the low light conditions.
Early or late.
Yeah, and you can really see it glowing, like that last 30 minutes of light. You throw a black frog and it disappears in the mat, but you throw a white and you can still see that white frog out there. And I know the fish can see it too, if I can see it. But, I'll start out with the black, but you can't, if it should be going on, you're seeing all the signs, you got to change, because they're not always going to be on the black. Brown is a sneaky color. But you got to go to white sometimes. And, orange is something. I know some people have been catching some fish on an orange belly.
Like an orange bellied one.
An orange belly. So you just got to mix it up. Sometimes some of the toads will have like a pearl belly. I've seen when you make a change. This is another thing I'm talking about. Sometimes they really get specific on a color. That can happen on a frog too, for whatever reason. Yeah. I've been fishing Kincaid a lot, and I remember last year I was over there, and I'd thrown a black bellied frog and I'd thrown a white bellied frog, and I couldn't get bit, and I switched to a kind of like a baby bass colored frog, and I started getting bites for whatever reason, and pretty much in the same areas, like the same cove, different side of the cove. Now, I mean, it could have been the stretch where the fish were at. Let's say most of the fish were in that little stretch where I switched. So there's always that variable. You don't know if it was the frog color or you just ran into the fish. But I don't think that's what it was. I think it was, for whatever reason, on that day, they wanted that color of frog. So there's times when that can be huge. That can be really big deal. What about you? What's your thoughts on the frog colors and stuff?
Well, number one, I'm not a frog expert. I enjoy catching fish on a frog, just like everybody, but it's not my strength. But the same thing on color. It's like if I'm fishing with someone and we're both throwing a frog, I like for both of us to throw a different color on. That can go to that ink lure too, but since we're talking frog, I'd like to. If one's throwing a white one, I'll throw a black one, or vice versa. And it seems to be a difference each day for one or the other. And yesterday, when I was out for a little bit on Cedar, I didn't catch any really good fish, but I did get bites on was a black one, no doubt. I'm fortunate. My partner Dale, he's a pretty good frog fisherman, so a lot of times he'll kind of lead the way and getting that dialed in, then I just tie on the same thing. But
yeah.
The other thing I noticed too is I won't make this too long. I know we get off here, but putting a little bit of weight sometimes in that frog sometimes will help too. Getting that thing to sit down in the mat a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that can be.
It all makes a difference.
That can be a big deal. You can also take that frog and squeeze it, and then just set it down on the edge of the water and suck up some of the water inside of that frog. If you don't have like any BBs or glass, something to put inside of it, just get a little weight inside of that frog, and that'll make it sit. Most of the time, that's probably the better way to go on a mat if you're not going to be actually walking the frog, because once you get weight in the frog, it is a little bit harder to walk. Even if it doesn't sink, it sits down a little bit deeper in the water, and it gets a little bit harder to walk. But there's just little tricks like that. Adding plastic rattles, if the bites, if they really want it sitting on the mat, you can shake it. If you've got some kind of rattle in there, it's going to draw them up. I think a lot of it is whatever you can do to draw attention to your frog and get the fish to notice it, because it's dark under there. There's a lot of grass, and if you can pull that fish from a long distance away, whatever it takes to do that, obviously you're covering more water that way. You're not just covering the water that your bait is dragging over, you're covering 10 foot around it too. So you can kind of look at it like that. It allows you to spread out your fan cast as you're going down the bank. You don't have to be so tight, but if you can figure out something that's going to draw those fish, sometimes it's color, sometimes it's weight, sometimes it's the noise, that you're going to be better off doing that. I love frog fishing. It's fun.
Yep.
But
it's that time.
Yeah, you got to cover water though, for sure. Here's a question from Hammy. How do you catch Central New York smallies this time of year from the bank?
Hire a guide.
Yeah, hire a guide. Waders. Just put you some waders out so you can get out there a little bit deeper. And I think a Ned rig. You got to throw a Ned rig.
Thank you. That's what I told him the other night.
Yeah.
He asked me for the top 3 lures for smallmouth. I said, Ned rig, Ned rig, Ned rig.
Yeah. That's the truth.
That could be totally wrong for where he's going, but.
Well, I would say green pumpkin Ned rig, peanut butter and jelly Ned rig, and yoga pants Ned rig.
Amen, brother. You were paying attention, weren't you? Used to have them lined up on the front of my boat. Remember that?
Yeah. True
By
story.
The gross.
Yeah,
that was the deal. If it was sunny out, it was peanut butter and jelly. Green pumpkin kind of always played. And then if it was cloudy out or really windy, yoga pants. That was it. It pretty much worked.
I tell you another color that's kind of good on the Ned bait is that's called Gobi Bryant.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, check out a pack of those. That's a good bait that works around here and on the Tennessee River. for all you co-anglers out there. Man, let's wrap this up. That was fun.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of good topics and had a good crowd in here, and a lot of people hung out with us tonight. Andy, get a hold of me and just send me your info and I'll get that out to you. Yeah, I know. It's a funny name. It works. It's a good color though. Really good color. So all right. Next week, Trey McKenna's gonna be on here. So we are gonna I'm gonna ask him a few questions, I wanna talk about live scope with him and how many fish of the fish that he weighed in, what percentage do you think he weighed in using forward facing sonar? And then how it's going to be different out there on the road with going solo basically. So we'll ask him some questions and hope you guys can come back and join us. It'll be a fun time. And man, Ron,
that'll be a good interview.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging out, Ron. It's good to see you.
Absolutely, buddy.
I got to get over there soon and jump in a boat with you. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's schoolie season now. It's in full swing.
Okay.
I don't know how, but there's a freaking million of them, dude. There are some days they're harder to catch. They've been thrown at a little bit. But if you catch them on the right day, it's still fun.
Yeah. Well, you got my attention. I'm going to try to start getting over that way soon. It's that time of the year. So
it is. It'll be fun really about all the way till about the beginning of December. It's a good time.
Yeah. What tournaments you got coming up? You said
Sunday. I got the final Angler's Choice at Cedar.
Okay.
That wraps up. That wraps up my Angler's Choice stuff. There'll still be one or two left on Egypt, because they can't fish during the summer at Egypt. Maybe that's why they're still fishing Egypt. But we're not focusing on that. It's just we've got too many tournaments to try and focus on this year. So we're just, for now and for the rest for next year, we're just going to, as far as tournament fishing goes, we're going to make Cedar Lake our priority.
Okay.
And just jump.
Yeah, you can fish it.
Makes fun. You
can fish a tournament every weekend now.
Oh, I know. And we've tried it, and it's not fun. I've been like the last couple of weeks out here, not pre-fishing, just going fishing, see how many I catch. It's been a lot of fun, and you don't have to go do what you think you got to do to catch the biggest bag. You can just go do whatever you feel like doing. Catch a bunch of little ones. Who cares? It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is kind of the sacrifice of tournament fishing. You kind of give up that to try to find a certain quality of fish. You're always just looking for a better fish, and
I don't know. But fortunately, this tournament won't be stressful. We've already qualified for the Classic, no matter what happens. So the Classic's back down in Guntersville this next March, so that'll be a good one.
Yeah, I've still yet to fish Guntersville, and I got the invite from Mikey Balls to go down there and jump in the boat with him a couple different times, and I just got to get down there. He lives in Huntsville, but he fishes Guntersville quite a bit. So I'm gonna do that. That'd be a good trip. It'd be a good video.
Not that far. 5.5 hours, 5 hours. It's not.
Yeah.
So bad.
I always think of all those lakes down there as being really far away, and Pickwick's like 4 hours from me. Chickamauga, Guntersville, they're not that far. They're not any further than Table Rock or Lake of the Ozarks.
Yeah.
Just gotta drive that way instead of the other way.
Yeah.
So, all right, we're gonna wrap this up. Thanks everybody for hanging out, and we will see you next weekend, same time, same place.